My name is Jenna Whitmore, and I'd been living paycheck to paycheck for most of my 36 years. I taught middle school math in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Not exactly a glamorous job, but it kept the lights on, most months. My car was a 12-year-old Ford Focus with more warning lights than a Christmas tree, and my savings account never saw more than 3 digits before rent, groceries, and the occasional surprise expense drained it again. My family, well, they weren't the type you ran to when life got hard. My parents divorced when I was 10, and both remarried within a couple of years. My mom, Lorraine, married a guy named Rick, boat owner, cabin enthusiast, professional penny pincher when it came to anyone but himself. My dad, Tom, remarried Denise, a woman who treated every conversation like a performance review. My younger sister, Brooke, married a corporate lawyer and moved into a 4-bedroom in the suburbs. My older brother, Shane, was charming enough to talk a bank teller out of her lunch money, but never seemed to hold down a job for more than 6 months. I'd lent him thousands over the years, never saw a cent back. It was a Friday evening in March when it happened. I'd stayed late grading quizzes, my brain fried from a week of parent emails and budget cut rumors. On the drive home, I stopped at the Sinclair gas station on Main Street for a soda. On a whim, I grabbed a $15 scratch-off ticket. I'd been buying them maybe twice a month for years. Most of the time, I'd win nothing. Every once in a while, 10 or 20 bucks. That night, sitting at my tiny kitchen table with a microwaved burrito, I pulled a quarter from my change jar and started scratching. The first number matched, then the second, then the third. My heart rate doubled. By the time I uncovered the last symbol, my hands were shaking so hard I had to put the coin down. I'd just won $52 million. I didn't scream, I didn't even smile. I sat there staring at the card, and a single cold thought slid into my head. If they find out, they'll destroy me. My family had a long history of treating me like a safety net. My wins were theirs to share. My struggles? Those were learning experiences. I'd watched relatives fight over less than $100. What would 52 million do to them? The answer was easy, nothing good. The next morning, I made an appointment with a financial attorney, a man named Howard Bennett. His office smelled like leather and old money. He told me I could claim the winnings through a blind trust to keep my name out of public records. We mapped out a plan, lock the money down, invest most of it, and move slowly. As I left his office, a strange mix of adrenaline and dread churned in my stomach. I was rich, richer than anyone in my family's entire history, but I was also about to start living a double life. The Jenna they knew would still be scraping by. The real Jenna would be holding a fortune, and wondering who in her world actually cared about her without a dollar sign attached. I didn't sleep much the first week after winning. It wasn't the excitement that kept me up. It was the thinking, the remembering. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a reel of old moments. The times I had emptied my savings for someone else's emergency. The phone calls that started with, "Hey, you're the only one I can ask." The promises to pay me back that never came. Shane's urgent rent money that turned into a weekend in Vegas. Brooke's wedding expenses that somehow landed on my credit card. My dad's leaky roof that I helped pay for, only to see photos of him and Denise sipping cocktails in the Bahamas 2 weeks later. The pattern was always the same. When they needed me, I was expected to deliver. When I needed them, suddenly everyone was tapped out or in between things right now. I thought about going full ghost mode, just disappearing from the family's financial orbit forever. But a question kept circling in my mind like a wasp I couldn't swat away. What if I'm wrong? What if someone out there in my bloodline would step up? What if there was at least one person who'd show up for me without a payout on the other end? I decided I needed proof. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about clarity. I wanted to know who actually cared about me, and who just cared about what I could do for them. The idea came to me one night around midnight, staring at the ceiling of my little rental apartment. I'd tell them I'd lost my job, laid off after budget cuts in the district. I'd say I had some medical bills piling up from a recent checkup and needed help to cover a couple months' rent. The magic number? $6,000. It was enough to hurt a little, enough to make someone really consider the choice, but not so outrageous that it was impossible. And most importantly, it would be a clean, measurable test. I wrote the list. Mom and Rick, Dad and Denise, Brooke and her lawyer husband, Mark, Shane, Aunt May, my one flicker of hope, Aunt Valerie, wealthy, sharp-tongued, and always ready to remind everyone of her country club membership, Cousin Trent, perpetually rebuilding his life after one bad gambling streak or another. 7 names, 7 opportunities to prove me wrong. Before making any calls, I checked in with Howard, my attorney, just to be sure I wasn't jeopardizing anything. He assured me the trust was airtight, The investments were in motion, and my financial life was untouchable. "Why go through with this?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Because," I said, "I'm not about to build my future with people who would have let me drown in the past." That night, I practiced my story in the mirror until it sounded raw but believable. Not overdramatic, just the right amount of strain in my voice. I wanted them to feel the discomfort of choice, not the manipulation of a performance. I knew some people would see this as a test I wanted them to fail. But that wasn't it. If anything, I wanted to be proven wrong. Because deep down, I still wished I had a family I could trust with both my struggles and my success. The next morning, I stared at the list, phone in hand. My thumb hovered over my mom's contact. She was going to be the first call. I told myself I was ready for whatever answer came. I was lying to myself. I started with my mom. She answered on the third ring, sounding like she was halfway through a conversation with someone else. "Hey, Mom, do you have a minute?" I asked, letting just enough hesitation slip into my voice. There was a pause, then, "Sure, honey, what's going on?" I told her the story: budget cuts, my teaching position eliminated, medical bills stacking up from a recent checkup. I let my voice trail off before finally saying, "I hate to ask, but I could really use some help, around 6,000, just to keep me afloat until I find something new." Her first response wasn't yes or no, it was a sigh. "Oh, Jenna, that's awful. But Rick and I just put a down payment on the lake cabin. We're pretty tied up right now. Have you tried asking your dad? Or maybe Brooke? Mark makes good money." Translation: not our problem. I told her I understood, even though I didn't. We wrapped up with her promising to see what we can do, which I knew meant nothing. My dad was next. I met him at a diner off Highway 20, hoping a public place might soften his response. When I told him the same story, he leaned back in the booth and crossed his arms. "Jenna, I've always told you to keep a 6-month emergency fund. You can't just expect other people to bail you out when life happens." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Dad, I'm not asking for a handout. I'll pay you back." He shook his head. "Denise and I are focusing on our retirement. We can't just dip into those funds because you didn't plan ahead. This could be a good learning experience for you." A learning experience, right, because losing sleep over bills was apparently a valuable life lesson. Brooke's turn. She greeted me at her immaculate suburban home, kids' artwork framed like museum pieces on the walls. We sat in her granite and stainless kitchen, sipping lattes from a machine that probably cost more than my car. "Oh my God, Jen, that's terrible," she said, squeezing my hand. "We just bought the new SUV last month and the kids' tuition came due. But let me talk to Mark. Maybe we could cover part of it." I could already see the out forming in her head. She'd talk to him, they'd decide it was bad timing, and that would be the end of it. I thanked her anyway. Shane didn't even pretend. I sent him a detailed text explaining everything. His reply came 2 hours later. "That sucks, sis. I'm tapped out myself. I'll call you later." He didn't. My follow-up texts went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. Aunt Valerie listened in chilly silence before saying, "Well, I've always said teaching was an unstable career. Maybe this is your sign to make a better choice." By dinner time, I'd already heard from Brooke that Valerie was telling the whole family I'd been financially irresponsible. "Cousin Trent?" He was enthusiastic at first. "Absolutely, I'll help. Let's meet for lunch. I'll bring a check." The day came, and an hour before he texted, "Can't make it, something came up. Rain check?" That rain check never arrived. By the end of the week, I was drained. The pattern was exactly what I feared: excuses, deflections, or outright silence. Not one of them offered a single dollar. Except, I hadn't called Aunt May yet. I'd been saving her for last, partly out of hope and partly out of fear that she'd let me down too. The phone rang before I could dial her. "Sweetheart, I just heard from your mom. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm, no edge of judgment, no hesitation. She wanted to meet the next day. Lunch was on her. For the first time in days, I felt a knot in my chest loosen, just a little. We met at a little diner on the edge of town, the kind with chipped coffee mugs and pies cooling in a display case near the register. Aunt May was already there when I walked in, wearing her usual cardigan with the mismatched buttons, and a smile that somehow made me feel both welcome and a little guilty. She stood to hug me before we even sat down. "You've lost weight," she said, her eyes scanning my face. "Are you eating enough?" I gave a half laugh. "I'm fine, May. Just been a rough couple of weeks." We ordered, her usual BLT, my usual turkey club, and for a few minutes we just talked about nothing. The weather. How the town library had finally replaced the flickering light in the reading room. It was nice. Normal. And then she set her coffee down and looked at me in that way she had, the way that made it impossible to lie. "Tell me what's really going on, Jenna." So I did. The whole prepared speech, word for word, job gone, medical bills piling up, $6,000 needed to keep me from losing my apartment. I didn't even need to ask before she was reaching into her worn leather purse. I don't have six, she said, sliding a plain white envelope across the table. But there's 3,500 here. It should at least get you breathing room. I blinked at it, my fingers frozen halfway to the envelope. May, no, you can't. Don't you tell me what I can and can't do, young lady, she said, her tone equal parts gentle and steel. Family helps family, and you've been there for everyone else more times than I can count. Let me do this. Tears stung my eyes, and not the fake kind I'd practiced for the others. You need this money, May. I know you've been picking up extra shifts at the bookstore. I know about the Parkinsons. She waved a hand as if brushing it all aside. That's my problem to manage. This is yours. And if you need a place to stay, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but it's warm and safe. You'd have your own key, and I make a mean pot roast. That was it. The dam inside me broke. I told her the truth. I didn't lose my job. I didn't need the money. I won the lottery, May. $52 million. Her eyebrows shot up, but she didn't gasp or shriek or start making a wish list. She just leaned back, studying me like she was weighing what to say. I see, she said finally. And this little sob story was your way of finding out who would stand by you without knowing you had the money. I nodded, suddenly afraid she'd be angry. Yeah, I'm sorry, I needed to know. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Sad that you felt you had to test them. Sad, but not surprising. This family has a way of showing up for free dinners, but not for the hard stuff. She told me about her own past, how she'd once inherited $50,000 from her grandmother, only for her husband at the time to secretly drain it into a friend's doomed business venture. That was the day I learned some people don't see you as a person, just a resource, she said. And I decided I'd never be that kind of person. By the time we left the diner, I'd made a decision. May would never worry about money again. Not for medicine, not for groceries, not for anything. But first I had one more thing to do. It was time to gather the rest of the family. I set the date for a Sunday afternoon, sent out a group text. Need everyone to come by my place. Important family announcement. That was all I wrote. No explanations, no hints. I wanted them wondering. By 2:00, my small rental living room was packed. Mom and Rick arrived first, bringing a store-bought pie like it was a holiday. Dad and Denise came in next, stiff and formal as always. Brooke and Mark swept in wearing matching down vests, looking like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle catalog. Shane showed up late, smelling faintly of beer, his sunglasses still on indoors. Aunt Valerie perched on the edge of the couch like she was slumming it. And finally, May, bless her, slipped in quietly, giving me a small smile that only I understood. I stood at the front of the room, hands clasped, heart steady. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors about my financial situation. The room shifted. Mom looked at her lap. Brooke avoided my eyes. Valerie leaned forward, clearly expecting drama. The truth is, I said, I'm fine. In fact, better than fine. I've just accepted a new position, executive director of a nonprofit I'm starting here in Cedar Falls. Better pay, better benefits, work I actually care about. I'll be transitioning out of teaching in a few weeks. Relief washed over the room like a tide. You could almost hear the collective, oh good, she's not going to ask us for money again. Dad cleared his throat. So why the big ask for help last month? I met his eyes, calm and unblinking. Because I needed it. I thought that's what family was for. Turns out I was wrong. Brooke let out a small laugh, nervous, not amused. We all have our own commitments, Jenna. It's not always possible. I'm not judging anyone's finances, I cut in. I'm just saying I've noticed something. Over the years, I've been there for a lot of you. Money for weddings, rent, home repairs, emergencies. But when I needed help, most of you suddenly had lake cabins, SUVs, and bathroom remodels to pay for. Or you just didn't answer the phone. Shane shifted in his chair, muttering, I was busy. Busy enough that you couldn't even call me back? I asked. Calling doesn't cost a dime. The silence that followed was heavy, awkward. No one rushed to fill it. Valerie broke first. You can't expect people to just hand over thousands of dollars, Jenna. That's unrealistic. I don't expect anything anymore, I said, my voice even. I've learned not to. That's the whole point. From the corner, May spoke softly but firmly. Sometimes showing up is worth more than a check. No one responded. Eyes flicked toward her, then away. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just let the truth hang in the air, something they'd have to carry out the door with them. One by one, they left, mumbling polite goodbyes, promising to catch up soon. Shane slipped out without saying a word. Brooke hugged me, stiff and quick. Dad gave me a nod that wasn't quite approval. When the door closed behind the last of them, May stayed. We washed the coffee cups in my tiny sink side by side. You handled that well, she said. No fireworks, but they got the message. I wasn't looking for fireworks, I replied. I was looking for clarity, and I think I've got it now. She smiled. So, what happens next? Next, I said, we start looking at houses. A year later, my life didn't look anything like it used to, yet it felt more like me than ever before. I'd left teaching behind without regret. The nonprofit I'd built, second chapter, had grown faster than I imagined. We focused on helping elderly people living alone, especially those estranged from their families. We offered companionship visits, home repairs, financial aid for medication, and just human connection. The kind too many people die without. May lived just 3 blocks away now, in a cozy craftsman house with wide doorways for her walker, a sunny porch for her morning tea, and a bookshelf in every room. I'd set up a trust that covered her medical costs and gave her a comfortable monthly income. She didn't have to count pennies at the grocery store anymore. I'd bought myself a modest but beautiful home, 3 bedrooms, a backyard garden, and a kitchen big enough to actually cook in. It wasn't the kind of place that screamed lottery winner. That was intentional. My wealth stayed a quiet, locked-away fact, known only to a handful of people I trusted completely. Most of my family still believed my nonprofit's success was the source of my stability, and I let them. The truth was, they no longer had the power to hurt me. Without the false closeness, our relationships had shifted into something distant but polite. Birthday calls, occasional holiday gatherings. No more begging, no more guilt trips, no more being treated like an ATM. There were moments when I was tempted to tell them, especially when Shane called asking for a little help with his new can't-fail business idea, or when Brooke complained about the cost of renovating her kitchen. But then I'd remember the silence when I'd asked for help, and the choice became easy. Sometimes I helped them anyway, quietly. When Dad had a minor heart attack and the hospital bills piled up, I made an anonymous donation to the Patient Assistance Fund in his name. When Cousin Trent finally checked into rehab, I covered a chunk of the cost without signing my name to it. They never knew, and I preferred it that way. On a warm summer evening, May and I sat on her porch watching the sky turn gold and pink. She sipped her tea, her hands steadier now than they'd been in months. You know, she said, it still amazes me how different things could have been if you'd told them right away. I've thought about that, I said. They would have been all smiles and concern, suddenly the most attentive family in the world. May nodded knowingly, and you'd never know which part was real. That's the thing, I replied. The money didn't change who they were, it just showed me, and that gave me freedom. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the air buzzing with cicadas. I thought about the girl I'd been before the scratch-off ticket, the one who believed love had to be earned through sacrifice, who gave until she was empty, who hoped every favor would finally be the one that proved her worth. That version of me was gone. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove I was good enough to keep around. The greatest thing I gained from $52 million wasn't the house or the security or even the ability to change lives through my nonprofit. It was clarity, the kind that strips away illusion and leaves you with the truth, bare and undeniable. The people worth keeping are the ones who stand by you when you have nothing to give but yourself. I glanced at May, her face soft in the fading light. You did good, kiddo, she said. Not just with the money, with the choices you made. I smiled. I had a good teacher. And for the first time in my life, I knew, without a doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Sometimes the hardest truths come wrapped in disappointment. I thought winning the lottery would change my life because of what I could buy. But what it really gave me was the courage to see clearly. Money didn't make my family selfish. It simply revealed what had always been there. And in that clarity, I learned something I wish I'd known years ago. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who only show up when there's something in it for them. The people who matter will stand beside you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. So maybe your lottery win won't be money. Maybe it will be a hard lesson, or a moment of truth that changes how you see the people around you. When it comes, don't be afraid to listen to it. Build your life around those who lift you, not those who drain you. Here on Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, we tell these stories not to dwell on the hurt, but to celebrate the freedom that comes from choosing yourself. If this story spoke to you, let it be your reminder. Sometimes the greatest wealth you can have is peace, self-respect, and the right people by your side. Because every ending can be a happy one when you write it yourself.